Hey, what's going on, Common Good family? Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. Super excited. I know it's been a while actually since we've been able to do one of these, the Common Good podcasts, but excited. We're kicking things back off. And if you are not familiar with the Common Good podcast, really what we're trying to do with this space is to be intentional about highlighting individual stories of just regular, ordinary people of faith who are finding creative ways to utilize their passions, their skills, their gifts, their talents for the common good. And the hope is that as you listen to these stories and hear what's being shared, that you might be encouraged, you might be inspired, you might be challenged to consider for yourself what it would look like for you to consider the talents and the skills and the gifts that God has given to you and entrusted to you, and how you might be able to use those for the common good in the spaces and places that you influence on a regular day-to-day basis. And so today, super excited. We are literally physically in the studio, which is Common Good headquarters, with my man, the one and only David Zane.
Thanks for having me.
We were talking right before this, and we were talking about how David's used to like being on the other side, right, of the camera or in the engineering booth and mixing sound. So we got David in front of the camera today. So appreciate you making time.
Of course.
I know this is a little bittersweet. As this is being recorded, we're not sure exactly when we're going to be airing this episode, but as this is literally being recorded, really just a few days, man, you're going to be taking off. You're going to be moving across the country to Washington, D.C., which we're going to talk about. I think that's going to be the bulk of our conversation today, talking about where you're heading, why you're doing what you're doing, and the journey that kind of led you up to this. But bittersweet in the sense of, we're going to miss you a lot. You've been just such a huge, vital, integral part of this community, the Common Good family. I'm thinking about all the different capacities that you served in. Certainly you've kind of been our lead volunteer, kind of sound engineer. Always the one that's kind of, behind the scenes, making everything work and making everything sound good. And thinking about even over the past couple of years during the pandemic, right? So much of that was really you kind of behind the scenes, making things work even while we were completely digital as a congregation. And then, of course, all the live stuff, right? Live events, Sunday services, Madaraka Festival. I remember what else?
Like Q Commons.
Q Commons, right? That was a long time ago. And you weren't actually just engineering that. You were actually on the coordinating planning team, helping us envision what that event looked like. So, man, you're going to be missed. Big shoes to fill. I would say this, beyond the serving, right? Beyond your faithful service to the church and all the different hats and capacities that you served in, I think really it's just your presence, and just your infectious spirit, your smile, right? I think we're just going to miss you. And I think on a very personal note, as a pastor, it's been a real privilege and honor to watch you grow and to be on the journey with you over the years and to have gotten to know you. And so I'm going to be missing you for sure. So try not to cry on this episode, all right?
It's going to be hard, dude. I'm going to miss you and the church. I mean, everybody here. Seattle was a place I thought I'd definitely put down roots in, which isn't out of the question, but this is the first time I ever considered moving away.
Right.
And I am.
Secretly, we're going to be praying that you come back. You're going to go back.
Well, please do. I do want to come back.
But even though, let's say it's just a year, right? That's still a long time. So, yeah. The reason I say this is bittersweet too, though, right? Because at the same, while we're certainly going to miss you, big shoes to fill. I'm super proud of you, and I know our community is proud of you. Just to have seen your journey and for you to have gotten to the point of where you're at today and making this decision, right? To move across the country and to embark on this new adventure. We're stoked for you, man. I'm stoked for you, and I'm super proud, and which is why I think this makes it even more bittersweet. We want to hold on to David, but at the same time, you're doing big things, man, and we're super excited for that, and which is really what I want to talk about today. Again, like I mentioned, we want to hear, especially for those that maybe don't know you as well, or haven't necessarily had kind of the privilege of kind of having that front row seat to the journey. Love for you to share a little bit about that journey. Before we jump into that, though, and this is more so for those that don't know you. First question, right? Like, who is David Zay? Who is David Zay? I know that's that's a big one, and you could say so many different things. But how would you answer that question before we jump into kind of the story behind David?
Yeah, I think the most succinct way to answer that question is just my vision statement or guiding principle in life, which is 4 words: increase love, decrease harm. And everything kind of hinges on that, which is, well, how do I increase love and how do I decrease the harm in my life? Jeez. So in my current state, I've been learning to really embrace the uncertainty of where I'm at. Like, I've changed a lot over the last year or last 6 years. And just, I know I'm going to change even more over the next 6 years. I've become more certain of some things and a lot less certain of some things. But the common unifying factor between all that is I'm just trying to get things less wrong. I'm not looking for what is the absolute right thing. I might stumble upon it, but I think that just making sure that I am progressing as best as I can is kind of my guiding principle. So that informs my work, that informs my volunteering, my faith, my relationships and communities and all of that. So
wow. That's deep.
Does that answer
That's
it?
deep. That, I mean, hey, that's as you share that response, that's like, one, it's super deep, but 2, it's not surprising, right? Based on all the conversations that we've had, I think to see you in your journey, like that answer to me is like very David in many ways. So that's awesome, and I want to dig into some of that in a little bit, but. Maybe it's, I'm thinking about those movies, how a movie starts like at the end or towards the end and then it like goes back in time. Yeah. I'm thinking about that as kind of like our conversation today. Cause I want people to know before we talk about like the journey and how you got to this point today, like tell us really quick where you're going. We're going to get into the why in a little bit, but like where are you going? What are you going to be doing out in DC? Like, why are you leaving us, man?
I mean, it's no small thing. I'm going out to Washington, D.C. to pursue this 10-month fellowship program through a nonprofit called Tech Congress, specifically their Congressional Innovation Scholars Program. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to get technologists, early career people like me, and put them into political arenas, mainly in this case, Congress, so the legislative branch of our federal government, and just get a lot more expertise of technical issues out there because tech is becoming a huge part of everybody's lives now. Congress members really need to be well equipped to be able to confront these issues and solve them.
Wow. So maybe unpack that a little bit, especially those of us, myself included, who might not be as privy or familiar to kind of what's even happening in Congress and like policy and those types of things. Like what's going to be kind of like and I'm sure a lot of it you're going to be learning along the way, but like practically speaking, what does that look like? What's kind of the day-to-day going to look like for you in terms of what you're doing?
That's a good question because I don't really know yet. I mean, I have no political background at all. I never did any classes in it. The most I had is like AP US government back in junior year of high school. But that's what this program is designed for, is to take people with zero experience in policy, but lots of experience in tech, and train them up so that the day-to-day will be a policy advisor. So kind of guiding the subcommittee or the Congress member I'll be working with. And if there's a technical issue that they want me to work on, I'm going to go out there, do the research, talk to all the experts in the field, think of what are some solutions here, what are some like questions you can ask during a congressional briefing, or maybe write like a statement for the congressperson. These are kinds of things that I've heard about, but we'll see. I'll know a lot more in 2-3 months. I'm really excited to learn who I'll be matched with because I get a big say in that.
Wow. Okay. So talk to us about, right. You mentioned that you had no previous background in policy. You weren't like studying poli-sci, right? Like, so this is a significant like career shift change for you, right? I want to kind of hear like the why behind that, right? Like, why does someone like a David Zhang, who has a very successful career in technology, right, kind of do something completely different? Not completely different, and obviously the work that you've done thus far is going to be relevant, but certainly the field of work that you're doing and the impact of that work and how you're going about that work is very different. So, yeah, maybe unpack that for us. And I'm guessing there's probably a multiplicity of things, right, that have kind of gotten you to this point. So, yeah, maybe walk us through that journey a little bit. Like, what got you to this point of saying, I want to do something different, and I'm making this career change. And for you, it's certainly, we've had these conversations. Like, it's not the money, right? Like, a lot of people your age, right, are making career moves based on like, well, if I move to this company, if I enter into this specific work, I'm going to make more money, right? But for you, like, it's the complete opposite. You're going to be taking like a hefty pay cut, right? So if it's not the money that's driving this, David, like what's driving this shift for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of starting points I could begin this conversation piece at. I think where I want to start is 2020, like when the pandemic first started. My office, the whole Sucker Punch studio, which I used to work at a video game company in Bellevue, we shifted to fully remote for the first time. So I was kind of isolated at home working on the game. It was crunch time because we were releasing Ghost of Tsushima later that year. And as everything was happening, the pandemic, the murder of the killing of George Floyd, and all of the anti-Asian hate violence and all of that, I started feeling a more sense of unease in myself as I realized, well, this stuff is happening and I'm here making a video game, which, I really like making video games. I went to school for it. I love Sucker Punch and the games that we created. But it felt super jarring to be in that state where I felt like there's something that I could do. I didn't know what, but instead I'm out here doing this. So after we had shipped director's cut of Ghost of Tsushima in summer 2021, I started feeling like, okay, well, what can I actually do to start advancing towards making social good happen? And at this time, I had a good friend introduce to me this social movement called effective altruism, which is, in 3 words, doing good better. It's taking altruistic actions like donations, volunteer time, and especially career to figure out, okay, we don't want to just do some good. We want to figure out how can we most effectively leverage our skills, talents, resources to do the most good that we can currently think of. And so as all of that was coming to a head and we were moving into the next project at Sucker Punch, I realized I wanted to work on something different. And I made a decision to leave Sucker Punch for something else. And at this time, I was also interested in music production. And so I thought, I don't know really what I'm marketable in. I'm good at video game programming, UI programming, and that was all I felt like I could offer. So my search field was super limited. I just looked for game projects or interactive entertainment projects in hopefully a social good space, which is very rare. It's really hard to make a game that does that, even harder to get people to engage with it. And then also the music space. So I ended up in that latter part at a company called Sony Immersive Music Studios. And like as I was working there, it was a fully remote position, which I wanted to do because I wanted to stay in Seattle. But at the same time, like as I was working, I realized I'm really ill-equipped for fully remote. At least I just need that face-to-face time sometimes. And also it felt like it wasn't hitting the motivations for me making the career change. I think I had made too hasty of a move out of Sucker Punch and made too small of a step in figuring out like, okay, I can really only do this very narrow subset of jobs. And so out of that, I started really buckling down and figuring out, okay, well, I don't think this was the right career move. Mm-hmm. What's something that I can do that's better, more informed, more decisive, and just a lot more well thought out kind of a process. So there's this website called 80,000hours.org, a nonprofit that helps with career coaching that's effective altruism aligned, and they have this 8-week program that takes you on a self-guided journey through what do you want to work on, what's important to you in your work, what are some cause areas that you think are important to work on, what are the long-term paths and the short-term paths for those longer-term paths that you can explore. So I did it in 2 weeks because I was super hasty about this.
Wow.
Like, man, I just
8 weeks
really...
and 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, they do it in 8 weeks because they want people just to take their time. Like
Gotcha.
They realize people have like a full-time job. At this time, I was on winter break, so I didn't have much to do. So I was like, oh yeah, I'll just do one part of it per day. It only took like an hour per week.
Gotcha.
So it was pretty easy to do within that time span. And one of the paths that was obvious to me was software development, but I'm going to take it into a different direction, which is working on something like AI safety, AI alignment, global economic development, things like that. And the less obvious path that was next on my list was public policy, because I thought that influencing and especially improving institutional decision making, the people who actually have the authority to pass laws and regulate and to fund large projects that could have a lot of good impact, that is a lot of times driven by the politics or the politicians and policymakers out there. And that was something that got me really excited, because up to this point I was also interested in engaging more civic engagement, championing some kinds of voting reforms and just getting people more excited and motivating them to vote. So I thought, that's a really great option. I don't know what to do about it. I don't want to go back to school for a master's in public policy and work my way up the ladder for the next 5 years. I don't really like going to school, honestly. So I kind of shelved it a little bit, but serendipitously, a couple weeks later on this Facebook job board, somebody posted about this Tech Congress initiative or fellowship program, and it seemed like it might have been a good fit for me. At least just the early career technologist, interested in politics, has no policy experience. I hit those points. I looked up like the resumes of everybody in there, and they're like crazy stacked. Like, people working in like research labs at top universities, or they've done their own startups, or they've worked at incredible companies doing a lot of public interest tech work. And I'm here like a guy who's made 2 video games for the last 6 years. And that felt like a big reach for not only me, but for the people who would like hire me or accept me into this program. So I talked with the guy who recommended it, and he encouraged me, just try applying. You probably have some skills that are relevant, like tech translation and working with non-technical people. So I did that, went through the whole process, and I got an acceptance in April.
Wow.
And so my hope with the program is to be able to explore, one, if this is a good fit for me career-wise, and 2, to be able to work in some areas that I think are important to work on, and to gain the influence, the connections, resources, skills to be able to further progress on those kinds of things.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. I love how... really, even the step that you're taking, right, it's not the end, right? It's just a step in a particular direction in the journey that you have now been on for the past several years. And I love that, of like this, like just being intentional, right, about kind of what you're choosing into, and then making mistakes along the way, right? Like what you did that's not to say that was a mistake, right? But like a learning, right? Like you thought this might be the thing, but it wasn't the thing. And so now you're pivoting again. And I think that's such a freeing thing. I think it's so encouraging for really anybody, but certainly like young folks like you, right, who are young in their career, in their vocational journey, right, and maybe asking similar questions to you. What I'm hearing, and I'd love for you to talk about this a little bit more, is a lot of the impetus then, right, for, if I'm kind of reading between the lines, a lot of the impetus for why you were looking for something different or change is really this notion of like wanting to do good, right, or impact. How do you make change, right? And you're seeing there's a disconnect between like where you were spending all your time and energy, your 9 to 5, so to speak, and then what you were kind of seeing happening in the world, and you're like, how do I like translate, like take what I could do and like somehow like transpose that over like the issues that you're seeing in the world. Where did that desire, where do you think that desire came from? Like, one, this desire to do good. And it's interesting because I don't think it's coincidence, right? Like, our church is called Common Good. Yeah. This is the Common Good podcast, right? And the whole like conviction is that even as a church and as people of faith, as Jesus followers, we are called and invited to do good, right? And that we are to be for the benefit and the flourishing of all people. Where do you feel like that conviction for you came from? Was it really kind of connected to your faith? And then how do you kind of understand this idea of like doing good and wanting to create and make impact and change in the world around you?
Yeah, those are big questions.
Yeah.
I think it really does, start at my faith. Let's see, I'm just going to go over the more recent parts of my faith journey.
Yeah.
And I more recently have been on a deconstruction and reconstruction journey. I know those are loaded terms. You can check out other podcasts for what those mean. But what really shifted in that faith journey for me was, well, I have this faith. What do I do with it? How does it inform my decision making and all the actions, the relationships I make, and the intentionality behind it? But also, not only intentionality, but like, what are the effects from it? Like, I could have like all the lip service I can to like, feed the hungry, give to the poor and all that. But if at the end of the day, none of that's happening, it's not really like, what's the point? But kind of that thinking, which is like, how good is all of that if it's not producing any kind of results? And so throughout that, I've been thinking of, well, how do I put my faith into action? And what are some of the things I have to challenge and relearn about my faith in order to get a better understanding of what God is like, what Jesus' heart for the world is, for people is, and what God wants me to do in my life. Yeah. Not like the specifics, although that would be great if he could just like with 100% certainty whisper in my ear, do this.
Right. Here's your 5-year plan, David.
Yeah, or a 50-year plan. That'd be pretty good. Just until the end of my life.
Yeah.
But you know,
no faith required then.
Yeah, exactly. That would be pretty nice. But I think it's instead like taking the next step of action, which I believe is more aligned with God's vision for the world, this idea of shalom, peace, that original creation kind of thing, where
so good.
I think a big part of how I view my faith is, how do we restore things into the original version of what God wanted all of this to be? That before the fall of man with the apple and all of that, or the forbidden fruit, there was this very idyllic and intentional and loving and perfect relationship of all things that was creation. And I think, I don't think it's possible for me personally to embody that 100% in my life, but I want to get as close to it as possible. And I think that was a really big part of it, of, well, what do I do with my life that can get me closer to that? What is the calling part of it is, what is like the perfect version of me, but not like in a perfectionist sense, but just like what was I intended for, not the specifics, but just in general. And that's why I came to the conclusion currently, I say currently because it could change, of increased love and decreased harm. Because that seems to me, in reading the Bible, that's what God wants for the world. It's to root out anything that doesn't create harmony and peace and love between all of creation, especially between people.
Yeah.
And so I don't actually remember what your original question was, something about how faith has informed this, but I think as I pondered that and as that has influenced me, I started to put more and more of it into action.
Yeah.
And this is just kind of the next steps. It feels like every step I've taken up to this point, like if you knew me from like right when I moved to Seattle until now, it looks like a gigantic step going into public policy. But every single step I've taken along the way has felt like a small incremental step. And I actually really like that because it allows me to be comfortable with everything that I'm learning and challenging and relearning. And it allows me the time also and the care to really analyze that and to figure out, well, is this actually right? Like I'm going to go out and do some personal research on this and think about how it aligns with my ethics, morals, and values. And, you know, I guess back to the first question, who am I? I'm an Enneagram 5. That most of you probably won't know what that means, but that means that like I really like analyzing things. It's the title for it is The Observer. I like sit in the background and I watch and I think about things. I build mental models in my head of this is what this is like. And I think in my mental model of what my life is like and what my faith is like, the subsection of that, which is what do I do with it, has manifested in this way.
I love that. Wow. There's so much good stuff in just what you just shared. Even just that incremental change, right? And growth and how that's kind of led you to where you're at. And I appreciate, like, I think what I'm hearing from you, right, is your understanding of doing good and wanting to make impact in the world. It really, like, it's rooted in your faith. But your faith had to evolve, right? Like, as your faith evolved, then that changed or impacted kind of these mental models, right? As you've analyzed your faith, who you are as an individual, right? Because also what I'm hearing is a lot of self-discovery. The more that you started to like discover who you were, that, and then pairing that with like God's heart, God's intent, God's design for the world, and then like those two things, and then now pairing that with like, well, what are the things in the world that are broken, and what are the ways in which I could utilize what I have, or the resources or the influence to actually do good, right? To create love, not harm. I love how like it's really the intersection of all those three things coming together, which I think is powerful and incredible. And I think super, super helpful for all of us, right? As if we could just think about, even, we might not necessarily be as analytical as you, right? But like if we could even just think about those three streams and like how we could find those three streams intersecting for ourselves, like I think in many ways that's what creates a life that's meaningful and purposeful, right? And I think in essence, like that's really what you're pursuing.
Yeah, that's my best guess at it right now. You know, the less wrong part of what I said. This is just what I think is less wrong to do.
Yeah.
And more, on the flip side, more right, I guess.
Right. I love that. What are some of the things you mentioned, you know, well, we just talked about how faith has been such an integral part of like this journey for you, and then you really acting upon your faith, which I think is awesome. Because so many of us, for one, like we you know, like we do a lot of lip service, but we don't always act upon it. And, you know, I was just thinking about that verse in James, right? Faith without works is dead, right? And you talked about some of the deconstructing that had to happen in your faith and how your faith evolved. What would you say, maybe just as encouragement for folks that are listening in, because I know a lot of folks, especially over the past couple of years with everything that's kind of happened, have been, if they hadn't already, are currently on kind of this journey of deconstructing, right? Unlearning some perhaps unhealthy, harmful things in their ways of understanding God, and kind of relearning or reconstructing. What would you say are like maybe the one or two things that were significant for you, kind of defining moments in that deconstructing journey for you that have kind of resulted in this kind of more holistic faith, right? Of then wanting to posture, to position yourself of like, no, this matters enough to me that I'm willing to like put my money where my mouth is and like change careers even if I have to.
Mm-hmm. I think specifically in the realm of faith, the biggest parts are what constitutes a safe space for different groups of people, and also the moving away from an absolute moralistic worldview and moving more into relativism and uncertainty. So I'll speak to that first part, the safe space. This is more of a theory that I've kind of been spinning in my head very recently, which is that like for different communities, a Christian space is going to look differently because in some part they're looking for some kind of safety. So I grew up in I'd say conservative evangelical Chinese church, where there are a lot of the adults and especially leadership, I believe, were first generation immigrants from China. So they were the people who came over here when they were adults and set up a life here, not abandoning, but just leaving behind a lot of safety and family and connections. And so that's a very unsafe space to be in. And what faith does, I think, at least in observing all those people at that church, is it creates a sense of grounding of like, hey, there's this God that's got your back. If you do these things, it will help keep you secure and safe from all of these kinds of scary things. We are the community that's got your back. We're going to instill a lot of traditional values because they uphold a structure that is very that seems to be a pretty good predictor of success for them. Like for the kids to have a better income stream and a better quality of life than the parents had to go through. For the parents, they just want like a physically safe and financially safe system for them. And this guarantee of heaven after death by doing good, or believing in the death and resurrection of Jesus, but also by doing good in the community and keeping an eye out for each other, I think contributes to that sense of safety for them. I bought into that. Like it felt great for me up until recently, during my faith journey, which is like, that doesn't feel as much of a safe space for me to be in those rigid kinds of guidelines, because I want to be a lot more open about what I can pursue and what I think is good. I want to like take risks in the sense, not only like financial risk or things not working out in my career or my future security, but just the risks of like, hey, I could like get some things wrong, and as long as it's not like catastrophic, the consequences, I think that's okay. That's why one small version of that was like moving into video games when I could be making way more money at a big tech company out of college. Some more applicable parts of that is like exploring more music. At a time I was considering, well, maybe what if I make a career out of audio production? Not necessarily like music making, but just like audio stuff, because that was something I thought was a really effective way of pursuing this increase love, decrease harm motto. And I think I needed a space that I could be more free to express the kind of life that I thought that God wanted me to go through, and have a lot more openness about the different paths that we can take. And they're gonna look different from each other, but I think a lot of it's going to be good. Like we don't all have to be funneled into this one model of how we move through life, the kinds of relationships that we have, the kinds of careers that we can pursue, and the scope of where we do our altruistic actions. I think it felt too limiting to me. So that's kind of the safe space part where I think Christianity can be safe to people in different ways. And it's okay for it all to be different because God is so multifaceted that putting him into a box of this is what a Christian is supposed to be like is going to ultimately harm some people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so good. So much more that we could talk about, but going back to, this journey, and maybe we could end with this. Tell us really quick, like, what are you most excited about? What are you most excited about Tech Congress, Washington, D.C.? And then maybe what are like one or two things that you're kind of hesitant about, maybe fearful of, uncertain about? Because I think as a community, we want to certainly, you might be leaving us physically, but we want to continue to be a community that's supporting you and praying with you and praying for you. What are you most excited about? One or two things. And then what are kind of one or two things that you're kind of hesitant about?
There's a lot for both of those lists. What I'm most excited about is the work that I'll be doing out there. It's completely new. It's going to be a different kind of culture of professionalism and connections and all of that. And so I'm excited to figure out, like, is this a good fit for me? Like, what changes am I going to be making in the future? And who am I going to be working with? Yeah, I had this thought a couple of weeks ago, like, I'm literally going to be walking through the halls of Congress at some point. And that's really wild. Exciting, that's too. Wild. Yeah, I've never lived on the East Coast either for any discernible or substantial amount of time. And so that'll be a big change, and that's pretty exciting. DC is a place that I've always wanted to visit. So it'll be exciting to live there. What I'm hesitant and would love prayer for is this is all brand new. So it's on the flip side of everything that I said about what I'm excited for. Yeah. It's also scary to do something new that I have no experience in that I could be really bad at. That's a possibility. I don't think it's a likely one, but I might, like, there's a lot of things that might not be a good fit for me. The culture, the kind of work, the hours, I don't know, maybe just East Coast in general. Who knows? And it's all that kind of uncertainty of, hey, like, is this gonna pay off in terms of, like, inform me of how I can do better with my career, do more good with my career? Is this actually a good step for me? And so the prayer there would be, like, to be really intentional about really learning and putting the most effort into all of the opportunities that this fellowship will give me to learn and to grow and to figure out what's good for me, what's good for the work that I'm doing, what's good for the people that I'll be serving. And I guess also pray for me to survive the humidity out there. I've heard really bad things about it.
What is it? What's the weather? What are the temperatures out there right now?
I think they had a heat wave. Okay. I'm not sure, but the humidness is what's going to get me. I'm okay with hot. I'm not okay with humid. And I have to wear a suit every day. Like, that's going to be a big shift too. So
because you've never had to do that.
I wear like a suit once a year, maybe for a wedding.
Gotcha. Yeah. Not on a day-to-day.
Nope.
Yeah.
So those are some things. Okay. And also, just to find a good community out there, socially, professionally, but also church-wise. I don't know if I'll be continuing to make Common Good my main church community. I have a sense that I do want an in-person community out there. Yeah. And that can coexist with my connections to Common Good virtually. So that would be a big important thing for me to find out there.
For sure. Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that. And we're definitely going to be keeping you in prayer, and whatever we could do to continue to support you. But I just love what, just as an encouragement to you, right? I think sometimes, especially when it comes to like career and vocation, right? Especially when, you're in your mid-20s, late 20s, it's like, I think sometimes we put such like pressure and burden on ourselves, like when we make these significant decisions of like, is this right or is it wrong? Going back to like absolutes even, right? And I think what I love about your story and your journey, and what I find so encouraging, and hopefully like our listeners find encouraging, is like, we don't know 100% like if we're doing the right thing, but is there even a right thing, right? Like, can God not be in it all? And whether or not this turns out to be the thing that you end up doing for the rest of your life, or or it's an opportunity for you to realize, you know what, this is not it, but like it gives you, and you talked about like, I just want to learn, I want to grow, right? And there's going to be things that you're going to realize, right? You're going to learn about yourself, about the world, about policy, about legislation that will inform whatever you do next. So I feel like it's a win-win, right? Like there's no way of really losing. And I think sometimes when we think about it from the standpoint of like, is this the right thing or the wrong thing? Is God I think God's in it all. You know, as long as we as long as we're pursuing God in whatever it is that we're doing, and two, we're leaning into the opportunities to continue to learn and to continue to evolve and to continue to grow. So I just think that like it's been so encouraging and inspiring to like get a front row seat to like seeing how you're living that out. That's why it's called faith at the end of the day, right? Every day, every step, nothing's guaranteed, right? It's all an act of faith, and you're living into your faith. You're acting on your faith, and I think that's a beautiful thing. That's an awesome thing. Mm-hmm. So, any final words? You can look at this camera. This one? Our CG family, even strangers that are watching this. Any final words for your Common Good family? Oh, by the way, I almost forgot. This is from the CG fam. Just a little something, something from the CG fam. Should we have David open it up right now? Should we open it real quick? Open it. And then you could give your last final words to the Common Good family. But this is from your CG fam, so you don't forget us.
Well, I just thought you told me that you were going to make me cry. Oh my gosh.
You could read the card later.
Okay, yeah.
Show them just so they know what they gave you.
The good old Macy's and some really kind words in a really beautiful card.
So here, read this little note from that's from the CG fam right there regarding the card.
Hey, P.S. We can never thank you enough, but here's a small token of appreciation. We figured you can use the gift card to buy a suit or maybe a couple of dress shirts or ties for the new job. Stay looking fly. You know, speaking of looking fly, a couple of pieces of my wardrobe were from you, so that was super helpful.
Man, we might have to send you off with some more, just so you can take it to the East Coast with you, man.
Only if it's for business professional, though.
Oh man, we love you, bro. We love you, bro. We're gonna miss you.
I love you guys too.
All right. Anything you want to say to the CG fan watching this right now?
Thank you for an incredible 6 years. I couldn't have done any of this without the community here, small groups, church, the leadership, all the connections I've made. And yeah, you guys, everybody is so important to me. And this isn't the end. I might come back. Even if I don't, you all still have a place in my heart permanently. Yeah. And I encourage everybody to also just increase love and decrease harm.
Come on, amen to that. Yeah. We don't normally do this on the CG podcast, but I feel like we should just do it. I want to just pray for you real quick, okay? So, pray for you. God, we thank you so much for David. Thank you for who David is, all that you have created him to be. And the person that he's already discovered, but so much of who David has yet to discover, even about himself and about you and who you've created him to be, God. And so we thank you that we have been so privileged and blessed as a faith community to be on the journey with David, to see his growth, his evolution. Lord, thank you for the ways in which you have constantly been faithful to him, the ways that you have surrounded him with this incredible community here at Common Good, and the ways in which David has truly been a gift and a blessing to this community. So God, we pray for your continued grace over his life, your blessing, your favor over him. Lord, I thank you for the courage that he is stepping into and the courage that it's taken for him to take this step of faith. So much uncertainty, so much unknown. But God, we know that nothing happens by accident. And God, whether or not this turns out to be the thing that he gives his life to for the next 20, 30, 40 years, or whether or not he realizes maybe that there's something else for him, God, we thank you that no matter what, you go before him and that you are with him. And that his community, that this Common Good family is supporting him and cheering him along the way. So we do pray that even though he's going to be moving across the country, that we could stay connected, that our paths will continue, that will cross again. But until that time, God, would you be with David? And we thank you for him. And we pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Pastor.
Love you so much, man. Love you so much. Hey,
Love you
CG
too.
fam, make sure you get David's email, phone number if you don't already have it. Let's continue to show love to him. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening. Hope you're encouraged. Hope you're blessed. And until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and God bless.